I am a huge nerd when it comes to storytelling, whether it be books, movies, anime, or otherwise. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that the most engaging pieces of fiction are those that emphasize their characters, the stories that unabashedly showcase the kind of personalities that permeate its world and provide the audience with questions to ask, feelings to relate to, or create moments that stick with us forever.
You forgive humanity this folly, then?
I determine my own destiny.
Sonic the Hedgehog is one such series, and though it may seem much more simplistic than its contemporaries, like various shonen anime or Marvel and DC superhero comic books, I'd argue that the Sonic series has yet to tap into its potential as a greater narrative stranglehold. But I'm not here to talk about the games. While there may come a time for that, there's already loads of commentary that do the games justice.
Or perhaps injustice.
With Sonic Frontiers now released, I wanted to bring attention to the writer, Ian Flynn's initial work on the brand. A brief rundown for those who aren't in the know, the Sonic stories in the games were quite unique up until 2009's Sonic and the Black Knight. The general consensus is that the games onward, with an exception here or there, had weaker storytelling and less compelling character writing than what had came before. However, Ian Flynn, head writer of IDW's Sonic comic series, has garnered a huge following, offering us very good stories that expand upon or even rival the greatness of Sonic's first 20 years. But Ian Flynn has been writing for Sonic for much longer than just IDW. He was the main writer for the second half of Archie's Sonic comic run, a version of the story that dates back long before IDW. And today, whether you're completely new to Archie's Sonic, an avid fan of Archie who just came to hear another perspective, or is someone who's on the fence about reading it and not knowing where to start, this video's for you. Short answer, issue 160 is a great place to start, though I do recommend having a basic familiarity with Sonic lore first, specifically the classic games and the adventure series. Other than that, we're good to go.
Before we begin, I want to give a bit of clarity. I will be covering this series from issue 160 onwards, but only the main story. Side stories come at the end of every issue, and while I'll mention the few that add to the story, I'll be remiss of the many that don't.
Let's play a little catch up for the premise. The main cast consists of the Freedom Fighters. You have Antoine, a French-speaking swordsman whose wit makes up for his lack of confidence, Bunny, who was captured by Eggman and partially roboticized, Rotor, the genius planner who is as smart as he is tough, Nicole, an AI that assists with their operations, and Sally, the princess of the Acorn Kingdom, the kingdom in which these characters inhabit. From there, the plot is pretty much the same as the games. Sonic, the Freedom Fighters, and a slew of familiar faces take on not only Dr. Eggman, but a creatively dynamic rogues gallery, and among all of those, I have to say one of my favorites are... Alright, let's set some ground rules. Every 2 or 3 issues serve as a mini arc with a given name. We'll call these chapters. Our first chapter, Birthday Bash, starts off with Elias, who is Sally's brother and the Prince of the Acorn Kingdom, leading Sonic to a renovated base in Mogul, a forest where the Freedom Fighters base their operations. The crew surprise Sonic with a birthday party, but immediately, the base is attacked by Bean and Bark, 2 of the hooligans, who were hired as mercenaries for Dr. Eggman. Thanks to Shadow and Fiona, they are quickly dispatched, with Sally mentioning how Fiona was familiar with the enemies. Fiona tells them that she didn't always work for the greater good. Shadow, who is working for Eggman in this story, thanks Sonic for saving Hope, a friend of his, in a previous issue, which calls for a temporary truce for the day. Bean calls Eggman to tell him that the job is a bust, and he proceeds to send over a giant crocodile robot to attack the base. Adjacent to this, Rouge works alongside an evil doppelganger of Sonic to snag the Master Emerald, but are nearly fended off by Knuckles' father, Locke. Evil Sonic manages to get near the Master Emerald and absorb some of its power, turning his fur green and becoming what many of us know as Scourge. Scourge proceeds to beat the daylight out of Locke and uses Chaos Control to warp to where Sonic is. Scourge explains that he beat Locke, and before Sonic and him can start fighting, are grabbed by the Croctobot. They form a truce to tear the whole thing to shreds. Then Scourge goes for a sucker punch on Sonic, and after a quick tussle, the Freedom Fighters jump in to stop Scourge, but Rouge intervenes to grab Scourge and make their escape. They are warped to a lair of a white echidna who asks Scourge to help him stir up some trouble for the heroes. We'll see more of them later. This next one's a bit of a doozy, so bear with me. We have a 3-issue set, The Darkest Storm, that starts off with Elias beginning his coronation as king. We cut to Tails, who receives a visit from his uncle Merlin Prower and his bodyguard Sir Connery, who is wielding a sword of light. Merlin is on his way to receive help from Elias in order to keep an evil, almost godlike wizard sealed within a Chaos Emerald. As the three of them head over to the castle, they are ambushed by a group of mercenaries called the Destructics, who are trying to take the emerald. After a scuffle, Sonic and the Freedom Fighters come to the rescue, defeating the bandits. Knuckles, along with the Chaotix, apprehends them. We then get some well-needed exposition. A trio of gods known as the Ancient Walkers placed a curse on a Chaos Emerald that the wizard Mammoth Mogul was one day fated to have, as they saw him as a threat. While being sealed away, Mogul used the last of his power to attack the Ancient Walkers, and because of this, their lifespan, and by proxy, the seal, will soon expire. There is a mineral called the Source of Awe that holds enough energy to maintain the seal, and it is crafted into the crown and the sword of the Acorn lineage. Elias eagerly hands over the crown, but Sally mentions that the sword was given to orphans of Arachnis. Elsewhere, Eggman and his robotic daughter Mecha are working on the Egg Rapes, a machine of 1,000 pods that siphon energy from people held captive within them. A group of spider ninjas break into his lair, use the power of the grapes to open up the Silent Zone where the Ancient Walkers reside, use the power of the sword to destroy them, and unleashes Ixis Naugus from the Silent Zone. Since the Walkers are no more, Mammoth Mogul is freed from the Emerald. Mogul quickly overpowers everyone in the castle, takes the crown, and heads over to free his minions from the Acorn prison so that they can begin the search for the sword. While this is happening, Eggman encounters Naugus, who has been given the sword by the Arachnis. Naugus warps over to the kingdom of Acorn to acquire the crown. As I was reading this issue, I was under the impression that Naugus and Mogul were allies, and that this was an entire plot orchestrated by the both of them. But no, once they find one another, they do not hesitate to fight for the relic that the other has. Once the Freedom Fighters find them outside, it becomes a 3-way all-out war between Mogul and the Destructics, Naugus and the Arachnis, and Sonic and the Freedom Fighters. In the midst of all this, Fang, who was imprisoned with the Destructics, decides to make his escape. We cut back to Eggman, whose AI program, Adam, alerts him that the Spider Ninjas were able to infiltrate his base due to Mecha conspiring against him, all while going under the alias of Anonymous. After a chilling scene where he instructs Mecha to initiate her own self-destruct sequence, he contemplates on how best to deal with Naugus and Mogul, as he also finds their power a threat. Back to the battlefield, Mogul acknowledges Naugus, saying that he is indeed gifted in the arcane arts. Naugus hastily tries to persuade Mogul into being one of his henchmen, and Mogul is so freaking badass that he tells Naugus, "Do not pretend to be on my level. You're not that guy, pal." Hell, even Merlin's like, yeah, no, Mogul is just toying with this guy at this point. And he and Sir Connery attempt to grab the sword while Mogul is folding Naugus. And well, an attempt is certainly made. Realizing how powerful Mogul is, Naugus asks him, how did that come to be? Mogul shares his backstory in which he was always powerful, but had to learn how to control his magic. Eventually, he gained a following and became Ixis Mogul, but was defeated in an era called the Forgotten War. Realizing that Mogul is his superior, he hands the sword over to him, and they team up against the Freedom Fighters. The third and final issue of The Darkest Storm starts off with Sonic in the midst of battle with his usual quips. Actually, I've probably failed to mention, but Sonic's quips are written all over the story. It's very akin to the character writing given to him in the games before the 2010s. It's one of those things that made me agree with Izuka's statement of Ian knowing Sonic's voice. His quip to Sally in the battle is in reference to an earlier infamous scene where she was acting like a selfish, annoying little Back to the battle though, Sonic and Elias attempt to take the crown from Mogul, and an attempt was made. And then, dear God, Connery, who is filled with pure, unadulterated badass, takes up arms against Mogul with a sword of light created by the ancient walkers themselves. Swing after swing, Connery gives everything he's got to take down Mogul. With no other choice, he channels all of his life force into the sword of light and strikes Mogul, unable to destroy him, yes, but able to destroy both of the relics in one fell swoop, made from the source of all, at the cost of his own life. Before the freedom fighters could apprehend Mogul in August, Eggman swoops in on the Hedgehog and fires warp lasers at them that transport whoever's hit straight to the egg grapes. Eggman begins to boast, promising Sonic that while he's not after him today, he will be back to destroy him once his plans are complete. Later on, they give proper burial to Connery, and Elias, shaken up about the loss of one of his kingdom's strongest warriors, has Sonic reaffirm him, stating that Connery would not just give up because an ally died, so why should they? The issue almost ends on a high note. But then we cut to Eggman's lair, which now houses all of the villains in egg grapes. Throughout this entire mini-arc, this entire chapter, there has been someone speaking, almost narrating in regards to a plan playing out as they intended. It's revealed to us that Adam was the true Anonymous and the one orchestrating this entire plot to have the Ancient Walkers, Eggman, and Sonic all destroyed in one fell swoop. The Darkest Storm is a very good chapter of Ian's run with Archie, as it's the first look into how well Ian can synergize character writing, stakes, lore, and build up onto later material while also maintaining the authentic Sonic feel for his stories. I'd argue that the Rogues Gallery is probably one of the best parts of Archie Sonic because the recurring villains, as you will see later on, are just as, if not more entertaining than Eggman in some cases. I will say, my only gripe was how bloated the lore was, and it was a bit hard to simplify, but I don't fully blame him, as that is a side effect for writing for an ongoing story. So props to you, Ian, if you're watching this. So here's the first look we'll have at a single issue. This issue is one of the best examples of a rising action I've read by far. So Rouge, whom we haven't seen since the birthday bash, is being interrogated by the Chaotix. She comes with all the audacity and charm that you would expect from her in the games, making a few passes at an unbothered Knuckles. She came requesting protection without offering the details, and when Vector threatens to imprison her for information of some past thievery given to him by Fiona, she begins sharing what happened between now and when she first met that white echidna. His name is Dr. Finitivis, and shortly after their encounter, he used his warp ring to enter Eggman's vineyard, find the Destructics, hire them, leaving Mogul behind to fend for itself. Then, they warp to an unknown base where what looks to be a disabled E-Series robot is guarding the corpse of General Robotnik in cryostasis. After learning about several missiles harbored in that base and how Finitivis planned to use them, Rouge disables them, steals a warp ring, and escapes to the Chaotix headquarters. After Rouge's explanation, elsewhere outside of Freedom Fighters HQ, Sonic and Fiona find Tails held up at gunpoint by Sleuth, one of the Destructics. Before even getting a word in, Scourge runs up on Sonic, and can I say that despite loving Scourge and how his dichotomy with Sonic elevates the story, I am sick of him sneaking Sonic. Like, dude, for once, fight the guy face to face, goddamn! Fiona negotiates with Sleuth as the fight ensues, asking them why are they there, and he states that they came looking for whatever the traitor Rouge took. Fiona finds that ironic, as he was one of the people who sold out the Freedom Fighters to Robotnik in a past issue. He retorts that being a traitor is an irony all her own. This is when things get intense, because while Sonic and Scourge are fighting, Scourge plants seeds of doubt in Sonic's mind, stating that Fiona is actually in love with him, and that she's using her relationship with Sonic as a ruse. Sonic becomes absolutely livid and is ready to pummel Scourge as he makes another dig at Sonic for his bad luck with women. We'll touch on that later. Fiona calls over to Sonic saying that Sleuth agreed to leave with Scourge as long as they get the warp ring Rouge stolen from Dr. Finitibus. Sonic rushes over to Chaotix HQ and back with the ring and tells them to book it. After that, Fiona attempts to reassure Sonic that whatever Scourge said to him was all a lie. Tails looks eerily worried and Sonic, disgruntled, lets it go and returns with her to Knothole. The issue ends with Julie Sue, a love interest for Knuckles in this universe, confronting and threatening Rouge to stay away from Knuckles, expressing that he is the only person who makes her feel like she can be so much more than just a soldier. And Rouge is just so in character that it hurts. She overpowers Julie Sue, saying that she specializes in taking anything precious, and she never comes up empty-handed, inviting Julie Sue to try and stop her, but reassuring her that if Knuckles is truly meant for her, then she has nothing to worry about. Rouge is truly something in this comic. Now let's rewind a little bit to what Scourge said when he mentioned Sonic's bad track record with women. Earlier in the series, Sonic and Sally were in a relationship. But around issue 134, one of the rather egregious issues, they had an argument that led to a breakup. Let's actually take a small detour to that issue, just so y'all can understand why I'd rather not touch too much of pre-Ian Flynn Archie. It wouldn't be a good look just to simply call it bad. There are quite a few things in this issue that'll come up later, so I'll gloss over those as we go along. So honestly, apart from the ending, this is a pretty fun issue, I'd say. The context here is that Sonic has returned home after being in space for over a year and being presumed dead. Sally, her family, and his all give him a warm welcome home, and Sonic can even understand his dog now, Mutsky, thanks to an alien language implant he got while out of space. That's not important for now. Sonic meets up with Tails and tells him that his parents have been across the universe the whole time, and offers Tails a device that has a message from his parents on a holographic system. To celebrate the war effort against Eggman and Sonic's return, Mina Mongoose, this world's equivalent of Hatsune Miku, holds a concert for everyone in Knothole. During one of the intermissions of the concert, the King Maximilian Acorn announces that he and the Queen will be leaving the kingdom in Sally's hands while they go on an expedition around the world. We also meet Mina's lame, jealous boyfriend who, let's just say we'll get into him later. But anyway, Sally asks Sonic to stop his fighting on the battlefield and join her as a temporary king while the royalty leaves for the expedition. Sonic declines, saying that he has to do everything he can to keep the world safe, and she slaps him, calling him selfish for wanting to fight against the tyranny that plagues her kingdom. Sonic gets rightfully upset, stating that everything he's ever done was to stop Eggman, as he is the strongest member of the Freedom Fighters, and Sally runs off in tears, stating that he cares more about fighting with Eggman than their own relationship. This is absolutely ridiculous and childish, and as you'll see later, very out of character for Sally. Again, this isn't an issue that was written by Ian Flynn, but insinuating that Sonic prioritizes his love for fighting over the lives of the loved ones he's fighting for is gross, shambly misrepresentation of any of the themes in the series, and in fact flies in face of many of its core values of teamwork, responsibility, understanding, and resilience. The authors attempted to dismount this story with engaging melodrama, and well, an attempt was certainly made. Alright, enough stalling. Let's get back to the main story, shall we? Well, kind of. One more detour. There are a series of issues that show us a story from 25 years in the future sprinkled all throughout Archie. In the future, Sonic rules the kingdom by Sally's side after successfully defeating Eggman. This chapter is a continuation of issue 144, in which King Sonic and his team scoped out the remnants of an old Robotnik lab to find a machine known as the Tachyon Chamber. The chamber collapsed in on itself, causing a warp in space-time. Issue 166 shows us the aftermath of the incident. We start with Tails, who searches for Knuckles. Imagery of Maria litters all throughout the kingdom. We find Knuckles with his daughter, Lara Sue, who is told to step outside once Tails and Knuckles begin to discuss what happened after the Tachyon incident. You see, our heroes find themselves in a bad future where Shadow is married to the Queen, Sally. Thanks to a machine that leaves its holder unaffected by the Tachyon's effect, Tails is able to recall the true timeline and asks Knuckles to help him find Sonic to restore the proper order. Knuckles refuses, telling Tails that he will have him arrested as a chief enforcer in Shadow's army for treason. Before Tails leaves, Lara Sue, who overheard the conversation, also remembers the true future timeline and works with Tails to find Sonic. Elsewhere, we see Rotor being tortured by the king for information, as Shadow seems to be plotting something with Lien Da, a cousin of Knuckles and a reoccurring member of the Rose Gallery. Since I haven't yet mentioned it, Ken Penders, head writer of this series before Ian's debut, had established a massive amount of lore for the Echidna tribe. Some of it is very interesting, but most of it I find convoluted. The takeaway here is that there are a ton of characters who are related to Knuckles, and they'll pop up a bit later down the line. Lienda and Shadow get word that Lara Sue and Tails are looking for Sonic and send their enforcers to have them arrested. Later that night, our heroes come across none other than Sonic the Hedgehog himself, covered by trash in an alleyway. Sonic and Tails reconvene, with Tails informing Sonic that he was able to keep his wife and kids safe from the effects of the Tachyon Chamber. While Sonic is relieved by that news for Tails, he breaks down, coming to grips with the fact that Sally was never his wife in this timeline, and therefore his children are gone. After comforting Sonic, Tails plans to restore things to how they were, by defeating Shadow and having Sonic retake his place as king. Lara Sue tells them both to get a move on when they are immediately met with the enforcers and their chief Knuckles, arresting all of them on sight. Lienda gloats about their arrest to the living roboticized skull of her disapproving grandfather Dimitri, while her child listens in. Meanwhile, we find Sonic and co are locked up with Rotor when Knuckles comes down to their cell, and after getting scolded by his own daughter, releases them, reassuring the team that this had been a part of his infiltration plan all along. Tails will hack into castle security, Knuckles will get Sally to safety, Lara Sue will get Rotor to a hospital, leaving Sonic to take on Shadow. Once the battle commences in the throne room, Shadow beats Sonic, claiming that he is no longer in his prime. Suddenly, Lara Sue swoops in, revealing her chaos abilities, and is able to match Shadow blow for blow. She uses chaos control to seal Shadow in a time lock that she claims will hold him for several generations. With the day saved, Knuckles returns home with his daughter, and Sonic reignites the ember of passionate love with Sally that was lost to the Tachyon Chamber's effect, asking her to once again bear his children. I feel that this future segment that we will see from time to time is a welcome break from the main segment, giving writers a chance to brainstorm ideas for upcoming issues while also feeding the audience a delightful tale of the next generation concurrently. Alright, hopefully those smaller stories have been able to keep your interest thus far, because after this chapter, I assure you, we're diving headfirst into the most iconic bit of this review. But let's not get ahead of ourselves just yet. We've got some lore to tackle. This story begins in Rotor's lab. A freedom fighter, Tommy Turtle, has ruined Tails and Rotor's research on nanites. Nanites are microscopic machines that can form together to create just about anything or used to disrupt other machinery. We switch to Eggman, who is in the process of deleting Adam, whose role as Anonymous has been discovered. He recalls some events following Sonic's return party in issue 134 and recaps the events in the Darkest Storm chapter. Remember when Rouge mentioned the Egg Vineyard in issue 165? Well, Eggman reveals footage that it was Adam who set Mogul free. As Eggman sits in his chair, distraught that he yet again has been betrayed by another family member, Adam evades deletion and captures him in the body of Tommy Turtle, who had nanites planted inside of his shell. Suddenly, back at Rotor's lab, Bunny's robotic limbs begins to go haywire, attacking everything in the lab, but the Chaotix quickly take care of it. However, this was a distraction orchestrated by the nanites, controlled by Adam, as Sonic's roboticized father, Chuck, knocks Tails out and begins to take him to Adam's beacon, with Sonic following closely behind. At the beacon of the city, created by nanites, Shadow meets with Eggman, wondering why he has been given orders that contradict an earlier objective. Adam, who is holding Eggman hostage, attacks Shadow, using Eggman as bait, and defeats him, and places both him and Tails, who was just delivered by Chuck, inside the power conduits to power the beacon. Okay, now for a bit of lore. So early in the series, it was established that Tails was a chosen one of sorts, being essentially a magnet for the Chaos Emeralds. During the aforementioned space journey that Sonic was on, it was also established that there were a set of Chaos Emeralds on other planets. Adam's goal is to draw those emeralds in and use Shadow to control their power. Sonic, who had been hiding in this city, waiting for a chance to strike, finally does so and begins to battle Adam, who uses Tommy as a shield to prevent Sonic from landing blows. Eggman tells Sonic that his egg fleet will be coming to destroy Adam, but Sonic says that he plans to defeat him and save Tommy before that can happen. Using the emeralds surrounding the beacon, he becomes supersonic, and to his surprise, is met in the sky with Super Adam. Eggman frees Shadow and Tails, who, powered by the Chaos Emeralds, plans to send them into the Silent Zone. Tails requests that Shadow opens up a rift into the zone, and not to any other dimension on accident, probably a reference to Blazes. Once open, Tails uses his power to send all of the Chaos Emeralds into the zone. With the Emerald's power gone, Adam's control over Tommy weakens, allowing the turtle to get in one last farewell to his ally Sonic, and to take control of his mind for a few seconds to fly into the line of fire of Eggman's fleet, sacrificing his life to defeat Adam once for all. Eggman remarks on his disappointment with his robotic son Adam before making his leave with Shadow, leaving Sonic and Tails to mourn Tommy's death. This is an interesting chapter, and I notice a trend where Ian is reintroducing the lore from the previous writer and gives it closure by wrapping up old storylines and giving depth to characters that I suspect he felt would be unnecessary or a distraction to later narratives. The best part is that he's not just doing this haphazardly either. He's giving genuine conclusions to stories in order to make room for his new direction. Taking over for a former head writer was not an easy feat, as Ken Penders has left behind really dense lore. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes. Strap in. Coming and Going and I Am are two issues that aren't a chapter, but they flow into each other nicely. So Elias has recently stepped into his father's shoes as king, due to his father's sickness. Sonic and Tails plan to use a machine powered by the Chaos Emerald to awaken him from his coma. Using the Star Post in Rotor's lab, they opened a rift into what has become a special zone now. An entity known as Feist rules over the special zone and has condensed all of the emeralds from the last chapter into a set of 7. Feist, who is in favor of our heroes for defeating Naugus, grants them an emerald for free, warning them that the next time won't be so easy. The royal family is finally able to awaken the king, and they all share a wholesome moment together. Sonic and Tails begin to leave, giving the family space to enjoy the king's awakening, but Sally stops them, telling them to give the emerald to Merlin, who had requested it for an unknown reason. Meeting with Knuckles, who is carrying a guiding star gem, Merlin explains that he plans to bring Tails' parents, Amadeus and Rosemary, back to Mobius. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Mobius is the name of the planet the story takes place on. They're equivalent to Earth. Powering the star gem with the Chaos Emerald, they are able to warp to planet Argentum. Once there, Team Sonic spots battleships in the distance, and Amadeus explains that it's the Black Arms fighting against an alien race known as the Zorda. The Power family finally reunites, with this being Tails' first time actually meeting his parents in person. See, didn't I tell you that issue from 134 was going to be important later? They return home, and General Amadeus meets with Elias and is elated, hoping that Amadeus will continue working with the kingdom to make it greater. and Amadeus shares that he has ideas on how to make Acorn great again. Okay then. Knuckles later finds Sonic in the cemetery housing Sir Connery and Tommy's tombstones, asking what's with the doom and gloom. They share a brotherly moment with Sonic opening up about his worry over Fiona's recent disappearances since the leak issue, his grief at the loss of Sir Connery and Tommy, and the ever-growing list of villains that they have to contend with. Knuckles teases Sonic about seeming overwhelmed, and his usual persona comes back to the forefront, jokingly reassuring one another that things will be alright. They won't let the sacrifices that has occurred be in vain. Sonic shares one last concern with Knuckles, wondering if Shadow is willingly working with Eggman. We cut to Shadow, who is now confronting Eggman about the truth of Gerald's diary. Shadow grabs Eggman and Snively, who I'll touch on later, but for now, just know that he's Eggman's nephew who betrayed him during the Penders era, but he was redeemed and now is working for the Doctor. Shadow gets Snively to tell him where the diary is, snags out his hair, and then goes to retrieve the diary. Up until now, Eggman had Shadow believe that Gerald made him for the sole purpose of serving his grandson, but no more, as Shadow holds a disc with the truth. Realizing he won't be able to scan it at Eggman's base, he rushes over to Freedom Fighter HQ. Sonic at the HQ is upset about Fiona being MIA, and as Knuckles enters, Tails runs off. Sonic explains to Knuckles that Tails had feelings for Fiona, but had hoped that he was over it by now. Sonic then starts to think about what Scourge has said. Then Tails comes in, telling Sonic that Shadow is outside being attacked. Our heroes destroy the robots pursuing Shadow, who is flustered by the disc taking damage in the scuffle, explaining everything. Shadow pleads with Sonic, asking him to uncover the truth behind his past. After scanning the disc, Tails explains that trying to dig up the data on it may damage it even more. Nicole offers to integrate them into the disc memory in order to interact with the data physically. Once inside, Nicole's appearance is revealed, as she had created a new form based on her studies of the Mobian people. Snively begins to attack the base, with Tails discovering that he put trackers in the hair that Shadow ripped off him earlier. Knuckles takes action, stating that he won't let Snively take away this opportunity from Shadow, as he knows more than anyone the feeling of being lost without any knowledge of the past, which is, in both Archie and game continuity, some of the realest dialogue we've gotten from Knuckles, as it completely aligns with who he is conceptually. Inside the disc, Shadow finds Maria on the Ark, who leads him, Nicole, and Sonic to Gerald. Time is of the essence, however, as the data is fragmenting all around them. Gerald fills in Shadow on the truth. And God do I love Ian for taking this opportunity to bring the comic continuity much closer to the game continuity, because Gerald pretty much tells him verbatim the same story that happened in Shadow the Hedgehog, the game. For those in need of a recap for 2005's Shadow the Hedgehog, Maria has a rare illness, so Gerald was seeking to create a life form that could produce the cure. Gerald was unable to create it on his own, so desperately, he decided to rely on the help of the Black Arms. Shadow is not only meant to be an ultimate life form that is immune to Maria's disease, but he's also meant to be a protector of the planet and a weapon against the Black Arms, if they ever chose to threaten the Earth. They were supposed to be arriving this year, but were delayed due to their battle with the Zordon on the other side of the galaxy. The corruption of the data is reaching its apex, so our heroes must leave immediately. However, Shadow refuses to leave without having more questions answered. Maria makes a final gesture, asking again for Shadow to protect the world, and reassuring him that she will always be with him. Sonic grabs Shadow and makes it out of the digital matrix. As soon as they are out, Tails yells, informing them of the attack going on outside the base. Wasting no time, Shadow grabs Snively's hair, saves Knuckles by blitzing the mech, and then delivers the most iconic moment for him in all of Archie. He is the union of ideas, both dark and benign, but ultimately in the name of love. He is the ultimate life form. He is the protector of Mobius, and he tells Snively to return to Eggman and inform him that this is who he is. I want to take this moment to mention that in the ongoing IDW comics, Shadow's character isn't written how he was back in the day, often coming off as a character assassination in most regards. This is due to the new mandate Sega has placed on their writers in regards to the stories and how they write for the comics. There is a vision in mind now, one I can accept with the exception of Shadow's unfortunate writing, but this? No, this was Ian knowing damn well what makes Shadow Shadow and bringing back the version of the character that many people fell in love with, respected, and even adored into the Archie canon. He is no longer a lackey for Eggman. He is Shadow the Hedgehog. Pleasantries aside, the issue ends with Sonic asking a question. Where the hell is Fiona Fox? Amy swings her hammer at Fiona, accusing her of cheating on Sonic with Scourge. Turns out back in issue 165, when Sonic and Scourge were fighting, Sleuth revealed to Tails that Fiona had indeed been cheating, and Amy just now caught wind of this from Tails, which, and pause for just a second, I'm not a huge fan of this reveal. While it works to carry over the tension from the last time Fiona was in the story, it arguably has a few ramifications on Tails' character. Firstly, why didn't Tails mention this sooner? When Scourge first taunted Sonic about it and Fiona denied it, Tails could have refuted and made this thing a lot easier. It would have given the accusation more substance outside of it just being a taunt from one guy if another guy is hearing it from Sleuth. And in this scenario, the love triangle situation shouldn't even be a factor, as Tails would have been privy to Fiona conspiring with the enemy. Maybe I'm missing something here. But yeah, no, this twist doesn't work like Ian might have hoped it would, but I digress. Sonic calms Amy down, thanking her and telling her that he will handle it from here. Sonic begins to question Fiona, and they break into an argument with her mentioning how she helped the Freedom Fighters in the Birthday Bash and in the League issues. Sonic accuses her of not being interested in him until after Scourge had been impersonating him as Evil Sonic. Scourge interrupts, saying that Sonic is correct in his assumption, confirming that she had only dated Sonic as she thought he would be like Evil Sonic. Scourge taunts Sonic for his bad dating record with the women again before Tails swoops down, pleading Fiona not to go with Scourge. She tells him that he can't count on anyone, which is probably the worst thing that she could. Yeah, no, f this chick. Sonic takes on Fiona and Scourge, with Scourge stating that he isn't simply dating Fiona to mess with Sonic, but that he truly loves her. In his dimension, women are born cold and fierce and violent, while Fiona chooses to be that way, which he finds hot. To add insult to injury, Scourge implies that Sonic fears him because it would only take one bad day for Sonic to turn out just like him. Then Sonic knocks him down, retorting that Scourge fears him because it would just take a little bit of decency and Scourge will turn out just like him, which bewilders him for a moment. Fiona intervenes, but so do Amy and Tails, ready to take them both out. But Fiona and Scourge make their escape via Warp Ring. Tails and Sonic have a heart-to-heart, confidently saying that Fiona is wrong, that Tails can still believe in the Freedom Fighters, and Sonic replies that of course he would never break Tails' trust. Sounding much less confident now, Tails runs off, saying that he wants to go check in with his mother. Antoine comes along, asking what happened, and Sonic fills him in. Antoine then asks Sonic and Amy to accompany him on his hardest journey yet. That journey being marriage, as Antoine needed moral support as he proposed to Bunny. Amy nudges Sonic, asking if it's giving him any ideas, and he says not a one. Excited about the news, they begin heading back to Freedom HQ. At the HQ, Sally is in communication with Knuckles and the Chaotix, who are accompanying Mina's concert tour as bodyguards. Knuckles shares with Sally that he got wind of Rouge apparently stealing the Master Emerald and planning to auction it off. She asks if he is able to confirm with his father Locke that that is indeed the case, and Knuckles makes it clear that they are currently not on speaking terms, but he knows where the auction is being held. As Sonic and Co. return to the base, she insists that Knuckles leaves it to the Freedom Fighters to take care of it on his behalf. Later that night, in the marshlands, the team consisting of Sonic, Antoine, Sally, and Bunny split up for espionage. Partnered with Antoine, Sonic shares a bit of frustration regarding Sally, upset that Sally sent them on a mission as soon as Antoine proposed, and a little bothered by her lack of being around in Freedom headquarters. Admittedly, Sonic is still a teenager, and Antoine attempts to correct his childish thinking by reminding him that Sally has a responsibility over the kingdom, that she's dealing with her father's declining health, and that she was stressed thinking that Sonic had been dead for an entire year in space. He reminds Sonic that while they are all in rough spots, that they are going to be there for each other. Sonic thanks Antoine for being a voice of reason. On the other side of the marsh, Sally confesses to Bunny that her decision to go on the mission was selfish, as she hasn't been on one in quite some time and is admittedly jealous of the engagement, as Sonic and her had been distant for quite some time. Before Bunny can comfort Sally though, Fang shows up, having the girl swoop in and apprehend him. Sonic and Antoine, however, are ambushed by Bean and Bark on extreme gear. Antoine's swift swordplay makes quick work of Bark while Sonic takes out Bean. Deeper in the marsh, we find Rouge waiting for a bidder to arrive to claim the Master Emerald, but she could have never expected Mogul and Naugus to show up. Mogul explains to her that someone took his minions, the Destructics, and was later freed by Adam. Mogul has lost his power and had to rely on Naugus's power to preserve themselves when inside the Great Vineyard, but it came at the cost of Naugus's mind. Mogul plans to use the Master Emerald to restore his power, but before he can grab it, Sonic and Bunny swoops in, stopping him in his tracks. Naugus prepares to attack them from the shadows, but Sonic bets 50 rings that he will attack from behind. And I'd say someone definitely owes Sonic a super ring. Mogul begins his usual villainous monologues about how he is still powerful enough to take him down when Sally jumps in and mows him down with her vehicle. Talk about making one hell of an entrance. With 5 villains down, there's only one more to go, Mrs. Bat herself, who reveals that she was on their side the entire time. She used a table and a lamp to bait and lure people out who may have wanted the emerald. She never stole it. The Freedom Fighters question why she never informed them of her plan to bait out any of the Rogues Gallery, as Knuckles had been under the impression that Angel Island had fallen out of the sky. Rouge claims that she felt that the ends justify the means, and besides, no harm, no foul, right? After all that, Antoine asked Sonic and Sally to be the best man and maiden for the wedding, and they happily accept. We turn to Eggman's fleet, where he asks Snively for an update on the status of the Hooligan Trio. Snively informs him that Fang's mission was a bust, but reassures him that his other plans are coming together smoothly, concluding that issue. The wedding issue is very light on plot, but uses that pretty well to play with contrast. Most of this issue is banter about the wedding, some somberness over the field and incident, couples old and new making teases at one another, and the girls having a ball trying out different outfits, except Julie Sue, who agrees with Knuckles in saying that while the engaged are welcome to it, the ceremony seems a bit overzealous for the union of two people. There's also a jab that Amadeus makes at Elias behind his back, saying that he may no longer be in power soon. Strange. However, SBO is missing from the bachelor party, and Knuckles informs Sonic that he is currently on a mission. This issue jumps back and forth between the wedding preparations and the espionage on Eggman's fortress to build some sense of contrast. While the narration doesn't take away from SBO's mission, I do feel that this scene could have been enhanced with inner monologue instead to show that SBO in this moment is alone. Writer Daniel Barnes of the IDW Comics is currently writing a stellar example of how one can lean a bit more into the horror with moments like these, and I do feel that this was a missed opportunity. Anyways, SBO managed to find out about Eggman's new plot and panics, attempting to escape the fortress but is immediately cornered. As the wedding comes to its climax with Bunny and Antoine finally married, Eggman vaporizes SBO and plans to come for Nahul. Now we often hear the term peak fiction so much in the fanbase that it almost doesn't hold any weight. But I can assure you that this next chapter is true peak fiction. For many people like myself who are interested in picking up the comics but didn't know where a great place to start would be, we were often told either issue 160 or 175. The reason for this, I suspect, is the status quo. If 160 onwards was Ian tying up loose ends for the former writer's work, and setting up the groundwork for things to come later, then I'd say that 175 onwards is truly the start of his legacy with this comic. Let's delay no longer. The Chaotix and Freedom Fighters are at the old base enjoying themselves when a concerned Knuckles tells them that Espio has been gone for too long. Julie Sue tries to convince Knuckles that he is fine and that there is no reason to worry. But Rouge, with a better understanding for Knuckles' concern, opts to adhere to his intuition, saying that she will accompany him to seek Espio. Guess you could say that the girls are still at odds over Knuckles. Sally tells Sonic that this is a good sign to see everyone enjoy themselves, and while he agrees, he can't help but feel that Tails is hiding something from him. Tails and Rotor share a moment, concerned that Tails has had it rough lately, and while it has indeed been a lot to take in, he assures Rotor that everything will be fine. Nothing is fine, however, as Snively comes crashing through their roof and begins vaporizing everyone. Rotor saves Tails, but that aside, nearly everyone, the Chaotix, Rouge, the Freedom Fighters, all of them were zapped away by Snively's mech, leaving, oh, would you look at that? It's our main four heroes. Snively tells Sonic that he was only a mere distraction, blows up the body of his mech, and darts out of there in his Eggmobile. Tails, realizing that he's implying that the kingdom is under attack, asks Sonic to shoot for the kingdom right away. Eggman has never been this intimidating, ever. The landscape is charred, the buildings are all destroyed. Sonic's home is no longer, and the citizens of Acorn are completely gone. All that remains is the image of the cat. Sonic, overwhelmed that his friends are unmistakably captured, Eggman retorts, reminding us that his beams are merely teleportation waves and that his people will be having their life force siphoned by the prison pods. Eggman challenges Sonic's confidence, calling him a failure for letting Tommy and Sir Connery die, for being unable to de-roboticize his father and Bunny, and questions his love life with Sally, Mina, which happened ages ago, and more recently, Fiona, asking Sonic, why is he all alone? Sonic can only yell back a simple shut up as Eggman makes him dodge for his life. Attack after attack, Eggman tries to break Sonic down, telling him that the rest of the world had turned against the Freedom Fighters in fear of Eggman. How else would he be able to build a fleet so massive under their noses? And why wouldn't the nations where the fleets were being built inform the Freedom Fighters that it was occurring? Eggman announces that he truly has the world under his thumb, and soon Sonic will be too, as he suggests that the blue blur is nearing his limit. This enrages Sonic as he darts to the other side of the continent, shouting, "I've got your limit right here," and slingshots back at top speed, slamming directly into Eggman's mech suit and sending him flying. This is such an iconic moment. Let me draw a comparison for a moment. This reminds me very much of the scene from Dragon Ball Z, where Goku unleashes his Kaioken times 20 against Frieza. In both scenes, the heroes are backed into a corner by an antagonist that is a perfect foil to the protagonist, actively challenging their perspective and forcing them to change through adversity. Both scenes make it clear that the hero thoroughly knows what's at stake before unleashing a powerful attack on the enemy that does absolutely nothing to them. In the end, Eggman's mech is much faster, much stronger, and more durable, leading to Sonic's defeat. Eggman spares Sonic, telling him to live for the rest of his life humiliation, and tosses him to the ground as he makes his exit. Tails, sobbing in the eyes, finds Sonic beaten but ready to save the citizens of Napo as they are still alive. Sonic returns back to the base with Tails to tell Amy and Knuckles the situation. Sonic then plans to go at it alone and save the city from Eggman, which Tails argues against, saying that Sonic will have to contend with the fleet, the fortress, and Eggman's mech suit. Sonic, blinded by worry and a bruised ego, insists that he handles it alone, and Tails yells, "Sure, just like how you had it handled a few minutes ago." The two grimace one another, but Nicole, who's still online, tells them to stop the infighting as she has a plan to save everyone. While Team Sonic is on their way to Eggman's fortress, Eggman taunts the captured heroes and the royalty on how weak and futile their resistance is. Before Team Sonic can arrive, Eggman tries to make an example of Charming by powering up his egg grade. Team Sonic breaks in, frees everyone from the pods, and saves Charmy just in time before his life force is completely drained. Sonic threatens Eggman, telling him that he has a head start to run away as he needs to check on Charmy first. While Eggman and Snively escape the vineyard, Tails and Nicole hack into the egg grape systems with ease since Adam is now gone. After having the doctor verify Charmy's vitals, the citizens all book it, with Nicole and Sonic ensuring Sally that there is indeed a plan to properly escape. Eggman catches up with everyone, blasting all of the escapees with his teleport beam. Soon enough, everyone except Sonic and Sally have been transported again. Sonic stops at a dead end, with Sally believing that he is out of his mind. Eggman blasts Sally, then leaves Sonic for last. As Sonic is blasted away, he smiles with confidence. During the assault, Snively was trying to alert Eggman that the beam is no longer transporting the escapees to the vineyard, and that the coordinates have been changed to warp them to a different location. Perplexed, Eggman returns back to his fleet, telling Snively to find their location immediately. Remember the Nanite City from Order of Chaos? Now that Adam is gone, Nicole's plan was genius. Her plan was to take control of it, change it into a near-perfect replica of their city before it was destroyed, and change the setting on Eggman's teleport beam to warp everyone to what is essentially a new replacement for their home. It's an absolutely ingenious plan, and it goes to show just how capable and important the supporting cast is outside of Sonic. I love stuff like this, as it plays with all the important pieces that they've been building up to in every chapter prior to this issue. Now that they are safe in the kingdom of nanites, Nicole can manifest into her physical form. Sally congratulates Nicole and Team Sonic on a perfect rescue, but Nicole alerts them that it's not over yet. The Egg Fleet is on its way to finish what it started. For the last issue of this chapter, I apologize if I lose my cool, because oh my god, this is peak Sonic, and very few things in the brand even come close. The villains who are imprisoned at the former Acorn capital were also with the civilians who got warped back home, but Nicole immediately uses the nanites to warp them straight into the New Kingdom's prison. Nicole's physical form vanishes as she needs to focus her energy onto the barrier she's put around the city to protect from Eggman's fleet. Everyone is told to check in with the doctor and immediately return to their houses and recover. Turns out Rotor was hurt trying to save Tails and damaged his spine, and Charmy, while alive, is suffering from heavy amnesia. We cut to Scourge, who informs Finatavis that Dimitri, who was being held captive by them, has escaped and is heading towards the New Kingdom. For the sake of clarity, this is present time Dimitri, not the 25 years later timeline Dimitri. Finatavis assures Scourge that it is all going according to plan to bring forth a new power known as Enerjak. We return to New Knothole with Sally, Bunny, and Antoine having thoughts in retrospect to their rebellion up until now. Sally wistfully asks Bunny a favor, remembering that before the war, Bunny wanted to be a hairdresser. Snively's sister Hope, remember her, flies towards the Egg Fleets, firing shots at Snively's vessel, calling him a traitor for destroying Knothole after they apparently took her in and helped her before meeting her brother. Tears in her eyes, she flies back toward the United Federation where she is now housed. I didn't cover Hope as much this time around, but I promise I will dig a little deeper into her and Snively when it becomes important. Amadeus sees Eggman's attack as an opportunity to plan and reform the kingdom, and Merlin advises his family to be cautious of this kind of thinking. Soon, Eggman comes down with his mech to attack the barrier personally, shouting that he will not let this kingdom rob him of his victory, and that Sonic, seemingly alone, comes out to face Eggman, who reminds him of the last time they faced one another, telling Sonic that his mech suit is specifically designed to beat him. Sonic is just so completely badass, remaining calm and composed, and says, "Yeah, I figured, which means you've got nothing against these guys. I assure you, I jumped out of my seat as the Freedom Fighters and the Chaotix launched a full assault on Eggman's mech. As Eggman's mech is victim to attack after attack, Sonic approaches to do the real damage, the breaking of Eggman's ego, telling Eggman that he greatly miscalculated. Sonic reaffirms that he's not the only hero on Mobius, and while he can handle Eggman on his own sometimes, when he can't, he completely trusts that his friends will be able to win. The Kingdom of Acorn has all chosen to continue the fight. So, game on, Robotnik, Sonic concludes. Eggman tries one last countermeasure from his fleet, but Nicole shields everyone, telling Eggman that he should accept their mercy and leave. Eggman retreats, ending the chapter with everyone complimenting Sally's new haircut. Welcome back, leader of the resistance. Now, that dialogue Sonic had with Eggman is the pinnacle of not only good writing for Sonic, but great writing in general. The scene acts as an inverse to the prior scene where Eggman tormented Sonic, but in doing so, Eggman proposed the question, what will you do now that everything is lost? And in the end, we get the answer. He will continue living his life and fighting for liberation. It's a stellar dismount to several issues worth of build-up. I hope I've been able to keep you all entertained, as we are now jumping into the last chapter of this part of the review. The House of Cards chapter wraps up one of the last lingering plot threads. So let's get started. Amadeus leads over half the city into protest to have Elias step down as king. Amadeus is arrested, and we meet Nicole and Sonic at the Prower family household as they watch the news. Rosemary says that they thought this would be the best time to advocate for change, but Sonic hilariously dunks on the guy, stating that a riot isn't going to accomplish that. I thought this guy was a tactician, Sonic blurts, upsetting Tails and Rosemary. Nicole advises that Sonic shows a little more tact himself, but he refutes that Amadeus made a dumb decision at the end of the day. She reminds him that things have been tense between himself and Tails, yet he tries to convince her that everything is fine, as he runs off to meet Knuckles before he departs for Angel Island. The Chaotix insist that they return to Angel Island with Knuckles to make sure everything is okay, but Knuckles tells them that it's something that he has to do alone. After Sonic arrives on the scene, Knuckles says his last farewell and departs using the Star Gem. In the Acorn prison, Elias wants to understand why Amadeus started a riot. Amadeus replies that he expected the king to listen to the voice of his people, that he's claiming now to be a riot. You had half the city calling for me to step down, he shouts at Amadeus, who begins to share his beliefs. He sees Elias as unfit to rule, and furthermore he feels that after 3 generations of the Acorn Kingdom keeping its people at war, change for a democracy is well past due. Sonic runs into Elias lingering in the park, discouraged and wanting to give his power back to the people, except he can't. The former king arrives instructing Elias to immediately punish Amadeus and all of the protesters. Bewildered, Sonic asks the king if he really wants to arrest half of his kingdom. Elias follows this up, believing that they should lend an ear to the voice of the people, and the king denounces this way of thinking, stating that they have ruled for hundreds of years and will continue to do so for hundreds more. The king has his family return to the castle, leaving Sonic unsure of what to do. Tails and Rosemary break into the prison to free Amadeus later that night. Apparently, the protesters are still upset, and the idea is that Amadeus could somehow prevent civil war from breaking out by reorganizing them. Nicole, being the city herself, is able to wake Sonic in the dead of night and tells him what is going on at that prison. Essentially, what is a page turn later, Sonic is standing center, telling the Prowers that while he can see many people agree with Amadeus, breaking him out of prison will only make things worse. Rosemary pops the question, would you be okay with Tails knowing that you let his father rot in jail? And honestly, this next part is so extremely controversial. Sonic says, I know you're his real family, but he grew up with me. Heck, the kid worships me. He'll get over it. Most people feel that this is absolutely out of character for Sonic to say, and in fact, a gross piece of character writing on Ian's part. I agree to an extent. It's certainly jaw-dropping to hear Sonic say something this out of line, but I can't help but think that this version of Sonic would most definitely say something like this, and here's why. Sonic is a very powerful teenager in both this story and the games, but the distinction lies in the nuances. Sonic and Archie is exposed more to politics, relationship drama, and various other adult-like elements that he does not, if at all, experience in the main series of games. Therefore, this Sonic can be seen as having depth leagues above what the brand is used to seeing. My point here ultimately is while this moment is awful, it is to some degree realistic as it touches on the extremes of this Sonic's flaws. In this case, His usual confidence has become a gross ego, and his carefree nature is now a lack of consideration. This is surely the worst of Archie's Sonic, but it is still authentically Archie's Sonic. Tails attacks Sonic, letting his parents escape so that they can enact their plan to get an audience with the king. And though reluctant, Sonic unfortunately has to tangle with his best friend. While attacking Sonic, Tails says that this fight was a long time coming. Sonic is confused on why Tails is so upset at him, but Tails refuses to elaborate. Meanwhile, the locks are undone at the castle and the guards are all absent, making Amadeus wonder if the king intended for them to get in so easily. They meet in the throne room and Elias says his piece about how this kingdom has fought hard, gives its lives, and made too many sacrifices to fall to anarchy. Reluctantly, he takes up arms against Amadeus and pursues battle. Sonic manages to get away from Tails for just a second. Tails pursues him, yelling about all the time he's felt hurt, belittled, or betrayed by Sonic. Sonic, not sharing this perspective, says that he was always being his quippy self and never intended for the jokes to be taken that way, that he always wanted to help Tails. Tails screams, "So you hooked up with Fiona to help me?" Upset that Sonic went out with her, knowing about his feelings for her, and feeling as if Sonic just takes away everything he cares about. Sonic surrenders, understanding now that this is how Tails has felt all along. I think Sonic's understanding here comes from a sense of relief as well. He's been at odds with Tails for quite some time now, and I believe that the tension played a part in his gross dialogue earlier. It was denial, him wanting to believe that Tails was still his friend so desperately in that moment that he chose to speak of him possessively. I could be wrong here. Nicole intervenes with the king's fight against Amadeus, bringing with her Sally to the throne room. Let me be clear, Sally is the true main character of this story in most cases. Like, she is such a badass and important character that oftentimes it feels like someone created this world first and then just added Sonic. Not to say he isn't pivotal, but just saying that Sally holds just as much weight as he does in this story, and with her willingness to compromise, she calms Amadeus and opens up discussion. We return to Sonic being honest with Tails, telling him that he knew Fiona didn't care for Tails, and that by dating her, he hoped that Tails would eventually move on because he didn't want Tails to feel the same heartache that he felt when breaking up with Sally. Fiona was just a rebound for Sonic, he admits. He apologizes to Tails, and they share a brief moment before heading over to the castle to stop the fighting. However, thanks to Sally, it has already stopped. They have agreed upon a compromise. There will be an election of 6 members for Not-Whole Council, and the honorary 7th member will be the current monarch. The city will be run by democratic monarchy from now on. In all sincerity, this was actually a great and easy to understand political drama. Elections begin a little while after, with the former king seemingly disappointed in his son's choices. However, the former queen reassures her son, stating that as the current monarch, it is ultimately his decision. Sonic and his friends are now near the ballots, discussing who might be running for council, when suddenly, Dimitri pops up, requesting for his grandnephew Knuckles. What a great cliffhanger. The issue starts with Eggman coming back for revenge, attacking the outskirts of the city with a machine containing a virus that'll destroy Nicole. But as you could imagine, Sonic's not going to let that happen. During the fight, Sonic states that they are wasting time as Dimitri just told the freedom fighters that Enerjak is returning. This piques the interest of the Doctor, and he allows Sonic to fill him in. We find Dimitri with Sally in the Council of Acorn, where he begins informing them about how he was originally Enerjak, a malevolent being who was formed by experimentation with the power of the Master Emerald. However, when that power was taken from him, he began aging and had to live in a mechanical body to prevent his death, and had been working alongside Dr. Finitavis to restore his life. Dimitri insists that the council hurries with their decision to help, but Elias and the rest of the council hesitates, choosing to have the freedom fighters wait until there is a solid plan. Charmy, who has been eavesdropping on the council, informs Julie Sue and the Chaotix that the council will not allow them to leave just yet. Eager to find her love, Julie Sue leads the Chaotix to a flight pad to get to Angel Island. Returning to Sonic, who has finished catching Eggman up to speed, offers him a truce, knowing that the freedom fighters aren't enough to beat Enerjak alone. Eggman, who pulls a Piccolo,
by saying that
Just don't want that alien monster interfering with my conquest of this planet.
agrees to help. Sonic reminds him that there won't be any tolerance for backstabbing, and Eggman assures him, flying away and telling Sniffly to begin modification on the egg grapes. As Sonic re-enters the city, Nicole informs him to head to the airfield, where he finds Julie Sue and the Chaotix planning to disobey the Council and find a way to Angel Island. We make a quick cut to Angel Island, where Scourge and Fiona, who are playing scouts for Finitivus, fills him in on the island's inhabitants. So basically in this story, Angel Island has different cities and tribes living on it. Scourge and Fiona introduce us to the Flame, Frost, and Dark Legion, 3 Echidna tribes, and the Dingo army that all live on the island. They report to Finitivus that the legions are becoming privy to the dark work he's planning for the island, but he states that he's almost ready. We come back to Sonic, who is trying to stop the Chaotix and calm them down, but Julie Sue tells him, "I thought we were your friends, not your pet mercenaries," which makes Sonic surrender. However, Sally interrupts, bringing with her a compromise. They need their best fighters in Acorn, but understands that Julie Sue needs to find Knuckles, which is why she's having a Nicole-powered drone fly out to Angel Island. In the meantime, Sonic and Tails will go to the island as the kingdom's most competent search and rescue team. Turns out the council decided to give clearance to Sally to command the Freedom Fighters again. Scourge and Fiona are just in the right place to see the rebirth of Enerjak himself. As Sonic and Tails set off, Sally is attempting to make contact with other freedom fighters from other nations. Dimitri and Julie Sue are filled with worry, but Nicole's drone has arrived on Angel Island, just in time to see Enerjak wreak havoc on the Dingo City. The Dingo General, Cage von Stryker, proudly announces that he will take down Enerjak like he has taken down so many Echidna before. Enerjak, without effort, sweeps him away, along with his city. Sonic and Tails finally land on Angel Island. Nicole informs them of Enerjak's whereabouts, and the two race off. There's a bit here that I appreciate, where Sonic is giving his usual sass, but Tails addresses it, and Sonic listens. I'd just like to know how cool it is to communicate to the reader that Sonic is keeping things Tails said in the previous chapter in mind, by keeping his most notable trait in check, no less. Jack descends on the Frost Legion and the Flame Legion, and begins to replace their robotic parts with natural bodies. Enraged by this, Leanda herself claiming that the upgrades were a necessity. In response to their ungratefulness, he threatens to send them to Albion. We'll touch on Albion in a bit. The heroes watch on, with Julie Sue and Dimitri getting more anxious by the second. Growing impatient, Dimitri leaves, hoping to take things into his own hands. Sonic and Tails finally arrive at the Emerald Shrine, but Knuckles is nowhere to be seen. They finally decide to find his mother instead, but Enerjak just so happens to beat them to the punch and decimates that village. He even finds the drone and destroys it, saying he plans to deal with whoever has been spying on him. Also, forgot to mention that as this is occurring, the island is flying closer to the new kingdom of Acorn. Sonic arrives too late, and before he can blink, gets word that Enerjak has teleported to the kingdom gates. With things escalating, and Knuckles nowhere in sight, they rush back to the city. With the city on high alert, the Freedom Fighters and the Chaotix prepare to face Enerjak, who slips right through Nicole's barrier. Enerjak descends upon them, disarming a frustrated Julie Sue and revealing that he is none other than Knuckles himself. In a previous video, I mentioned that at the end of every issue, there are short side stories that occasionally add to the main plot. This one takes place literally right now as Knuckles is revealing himself as Enerjak. Archimedes, the Fire Ant, has always watched over Knuckles, as he is the one who trains each Master Emerald Guardian. He revisits the last few days in which he left Angel Island to resistance against Eggman's evasion. He returned just in time to see Knuckles beat by Scourge and the Destructives, who, quick reminder, were hired by Finitivus back in the Birthday Bash and Leak chapters respectively. Once delivered to Finitivus, he explains that Eggman tested the egg grapes on thousands of the Echidnas, causing Leanda of the Flame Legion and Remington of the Frost region to call a truce, but the Doctor, using the Master Emerald, has found the power to destroy technology. Knuckles takes on the burden of power from the Master Emerald, but since it was hexed by Finitivus, he becomes the malevolent god, Enerjak. Knuckles delivers a villainous dialogue about liberating people from the evils of technology, but his philosophy is rejected with Nicole reminding him that it gave her life. Enerjak, disappointed, begins to use his powers on Julie Sue when Sonic swoops in the nick of time. However, Sonic's power isn't enough to take on Enerjak alone, but he's not alone as Shadow, as an Ancient of Gun, joins the fight. Sonic and Shadow are both swept away by Enerjak's power, but Shadow removes his inhibitor rings and goes full power against Enerjak. We switch to New Megapolis in Eggman's lair where he watches from afar and has Snively preparing a modified egg grape. Eggman sets off to help the Acorn Kingdom. The battle wages on, with Sonic delivering a blow to Enerjak's head, revealing him again to be Knuckles. Shadow tells Sonic not to lose his resolve, and the forces attempt to rush Enerjak, who uses his power to stop them in their tracks. He begins stating that he planned to be gentle with his friends while purging the world, but Sonic tries to get him to see reason. Eggman's fleet arrives firing the warp beams at Enerjak until he is caught and transported to the egg grave. Despite Sonic being upset, Eggman reminds him that he technically didn't betray them. Sonic asks Sally for a plan for rescuing Knuckles, and she's not convinced that they should, as he is currently a threat. Suddenly, Julie Sue and Sonic are pulled through a warp ring by Locke, who claims to have found a weapon that can stop Enerjak. Before Sonic and Julie Sue can feel relieved though, Locke informs them that this weapon was intended to destroy Enerjak. Locke wants to take out his own son. We cut to just a few moments prior on Angel Island, where Remington and Locke had discovered a recording of Galen Ah, ahead of the Council of Albion, an echidna city of science and technology. She explains that Knuckles was engineered with chaos power at birth that he could not control, so a young scientist tried using a suit to siphon out reserves of that energy, stabilizing Knuckles. That scientist was Finitivis himself, and by doing so, he ended up taking the negative chaos energy, becoming malevolent. He helped Eggman lead an assault on Albion by sabotaging their defenses. Finitivis' big plan is revealed. He used the Eggman Empire to destroy Albion, manipulated the Echidna people into believing that he was their savior, got access to the Master Emerald, and used that dark power to release Enerjak from within Knuckles, or at least, that's the gist of it. I won't deny that despite it being sort of well explained, it admittedly does feel a little confusing. Let's move on. Julie Sue and Locke have a debate while Sonic seems lost in thought. He tells Locke to show him the weapon. Julie Sue begins to protest as Locke opens up another portal to the temple. Lying away for them, however, is Scourge and the Destructives. Enerjak is having his energy siphoned at Eggman's lair when Snively enters, bringing with him Dimitri, who has defected to the side of Eggman. Suddenly, an energy surge destroys the egg grate, freeing Enerjak. Eggman tries to regain control of the situation. As Sonic and Co. tango with the Destructives, Locke explains that Finitivis blocked his link with the Master Emerald. Julie Sue asks how did he even get close to the Emerald in the first place, and Locke says that he couldn't guard it as he had to search for his people, blaming Knuckles for not performing his duty, and she yells, "But that excuses you from abandoning yours?" Our heroes get jumped, but Archimedes creates a wall of fire, instructing them to get inside the temple where the weapon lies. Archimedes tells Locke that they aren't going to be using the weapon, as Knuckles' transformation is the fault for himself as a mentor and Locke as a father who experimented on Knuckles in the first place. We put the world onto his shoulders and told him to bear it. We're as guilty for creating this Enerjak as Finitivis. I love this. Along with Julie Sue, there is a strong theme of fatherhood accountability at play. Sonic finds the weapon, but the Destructives arrive saying that they have been hired to keep that weapon out of Sonic's hands no matter what. Oh, well, if that's the case, Sonic says, as he smashes the weapon to pieces. Sonic tells Locke that destroying Knuckles was never gonna happen, but that he does have a plan, and races off. Meanwhile, Enerjak completely decimates the egg fleet in a godly display. I mean, look at this. However, he had too much of his energy siphoned and warps back to Finitivis to restore his strength. Just then, Sonic speeds in and lands on top of the Master Emerald. Deciding to handle Enerjak is to neutralize the dark chaos energy within him. Like perfect chaos, once again, we get to see Sonic transform into Super Sonic, ready to take on Enerjak. The side story at the end of this issue begins a few hours prior with Scourge charging a warp ring with the Master Emerald, using it as a plan B in case things fly south. Finnativus finds him and begins to explain that Echidna ancestors disagreed on whether to keep Angel Island in the air or return it to the ground. This division between the tribes is what created the first experiments that led to the very first Enerjak, and Finnativus had been studying the schism in the tribe in order to learn that power. The battle between Enerjak and Supersonic begins. Supersonic breaks Enerjak's wand and even takes an energy blast. Locke doesn't believe Sonic's transformation will last long, insisting that he shouldn't have destroyed the weapon. Julie Sue yells at him, "You've had plenty of chances to destroy the son you hate." I don't hate Knuckles, but he's become everything we've worked to create. Archimedes joins. It was our training, the experiments on his DNA, and the chaos energy that led to this. But he is not a mistake to bury, Locke. We are as much to blame, if not more. The two of them rush to stop Finnativus, leaving Locke behind. The Destructives decide their mission is over and begin to leave Angel Island. Scourge has different plans, however, using the warp link to leave the planet in search of something new, inviting Fiona to tag along. Sonic's fight with Enerjak continues, but even he sees that he's running out of time to finish it. Julie Sue confronts Finnativus, who explains that the only way to stop his plans is for someone to give up their life. Julie Sue doesn't hesitate to sacrifice her life, but Archimedes tells her that it is his responsibility as mentor. Locke appears, correcting the error, telling him that it is he who will forfeit his life in order to save his son. Finnativus attacks them to prevent them from getting to the Master Emerald, but Archimedes grabs the Doctor and warps him elsewhere. Locke, taking accountability for his mistakes, sits upon the Master Emerald and begins to chant, "The servers are the seven chaos," he begins, and Sonic is finally able to neutralize the negative energy and save Knuckles. Julie Sue cries, telling Knuckles about his father's sacrifice. Finnativus returns, trying to take the Master Emerald, but Knuckles just knocks him silly. Finnativus then escapes through a warp ring. With the day saved, the heroes are about to go home when Knuckles declares that he is never making a mistake of leaving ever again, and will be the sole guardian of the Master Emerald from now on. The issue's side story ends with Eggman recruiting the Dark Legion, who will be working under Dimitri from now on. Before I end things, we're going to add this side story from issue 186 in here as well, since it deals with the aftermath of the Enerjak Saga. Knuckles flies over the city of Albion to survey the damage that has been done to the city. He is remorseful of attacking his people as Enerjak and warps to an oasis in Sandopolis Zone. Knuckles meets with Cage Von Stryker's father, the Dingo Army's general. The Dingoes are planning to return to the interior of Angel Island like they were before. Knuckles informs the general that he was Enerjak and apologizes for the attack on his people, particularly his son. The Chaotix are creating a bridge between Angel Island and the Emerald Shrine, similar to the one in Sonic Adventure, while Knuckles watches from a distance, loathing and guilt. Rouge finds him in the bushes. Knuckles blames himself for not managing things on Angel Island, and for the death of his father, Locke. Rouge comments that Eggman and Finnativus would have been up to their sinister schemes regardless. She makes a point that the old policies of the Echidna Legions have proven to fail, especially since they weren't able to defend themselves against the Eggman Empire, and especially now that the Legion has left Angel Island. Knuckles fulfilling his duties would not have changed anything. She encourages him to not give up on just the island, but also not to give up on his friends, reminding him that with the Warp Ring, he has a way to protect both. Knuckles thanks Rouge for setting him straight and reconciles with the Chaotix. Rouge, however, calls him naive, as her good advice doubles as a way for her to get more chances to snag the Master Emerald. I really love this. It's sick, but it's Rouge at her finest. Alright. After finishing her music tour, Mina Mongoose returns to the kingdom. Remember in issue 134? When I mentioned Mina's band manager and boyfriend Ash? Since Mina is also one of Sonic's ex-girlfriends, Ash would often be rude to him because he was uncomfortable with Mina's lingering ex being around, which he now apologizes for. Ash goes to fetch the luggage, while Mina asks Sonic to show her the destroyed remnants of the original knothole. She mentions her goal was to rally the nations against the Eggman Empire by inspiring them with her music. They find Mighty repairing the old base. Mina thanks the Chaotix for keeping her safe during the start of her tour. if you guys recall issue 173. She asks about Knuckles' whereabouts, and Sonic and Mighty glance at one another somberly before filling her in on the Enerjak situation. Tails then swoops down, lightening the mood. Tails tells them that they've got the lab up and running. When they enter the lab, Nicole greets Mina and tells Sonic that Mogul wishes to speak with him at the Acorn prison. Please let him have a sore throat. I have plans for the rest of the day, Sonic pleads. Mogul threatens to use his power to sick the fearsome foursome, strange name, onto Sonic. Sonic calls his bluff, stating that his cage repels his magic. He walks away laughing. Later that night, Mogul explains to Fang that he can control people he has marked, and by using his psychic abilities, he takes control of Mina Mongoose, Mighty the Armadillo, and Tails Miles Prower, mind-controlled by Mogul. The three of them march onto Sonic's quarters in the base, attacking him, and say, "You were warned, now rise, my fourth." Sonic does the usual song and dance with his mind-controlled friends as Mogul explains through them how he managed to do this. Ash intervenes to stop Mina, and Sonic stops Tails. Mogul decides to make another plan, and all three friends run off in separate directions. Sonic fills Ash in on what's going on and takes him to meet Mogul in the Acorn prison. They confront Mogul, demanding for him to release their friends from the mind control. Mogul explains that he has Tails flying into the atmosphere until he passes out and falls to his death, that he has Mina speeding above the ocean and will tell her to stop so that she can drown, and that he has Mighty walking straight into the Eggman Empire unarmed. Sonic realizes that he is not fast enough to catch all three of his friends at once. Mogul, now with the upper hand, demands a Chaos Emerald to be released from his cage, if Sonic wants his friends to return home safely, that is. Sonic and Ash race into the Acorn Castle, snags the emerald, and hands it over to Mogul. All three of Sonic's friends begin turning back around to the Acorn Kingdom. Nicole, unknowing of the situation, berates Sonic, then Mogul frees the rest of the prisoners. Mogul, now restored to his former glory, grabs Sonic with his psychic abilities, and tells Sonic that the fearsome foursome are decommissioned, declaring that he cannot best Sonic. His reasoning being that Sonic has managed to find a way to take him down twice, even at his full power. He decides that his best course of action is to wait until Sonic grows old of age to enact his revenge. Mogul teleports elsewhere, accompanied by his prison mates. A bit later, Mighty, Tails, and Mina reconcile with Ash and Sonic, who reassures them that their loss is only temporary. We aren't done with Mogul quite yet, as a bit later, Rouge and a fellow spy, a skunk by the name of Jeffrey St. John, enters the Mogul's new club in a casino night zone. They run into and are greeted by Mogul instantly, and they have a conversation about how Mogul managed to turn an old Eggman base into an international success overnight. One of the casino attendants calls Mogul to a meeting, some of which, if you're familiar with early Western Sonic material, you'll recognize as Scratch, Grounder, and Coconuts, some of Eggman's original badniks. That aside, Mogul has a meeting with the Hooligan Trio and Sleuth of the Destructics. Sleuth plays hard with Mogul, saying that getting captured by Eggman in issue 164 and him letting Sonic off easy makes him look like he's going soft. He questions if the Destructics can even work with Mogul anymore. Being a complete man of business, however, Mogul calls his bluff, reading that Sleuth, at the end of the day, is in it for the money, and that his being there is proof enough. Mogul puts a bounty on Sonic's head. Elsewhere, our favorite uncle, Merlin Prower, dispels Mogul's markings from Tails, Mina, and Mighty and removes anything remaining of Enerjak from Knuckles. After taking care of that, Merlin gives his farewell to Tails before setting off. Sonic and Sally meet up in the woods near the remains of the former kingdom and begin to reminisce on old times. Before they can finish having their moment, Bean and Bark come storming in. It's like the birthday bash all over again. Tussling with Bark, Sonic puts two and two together, realizing that Mogul put a bounty on his head. While Sally outsmarts Bean, Sonic gets sucker punched by Bark off a cliff. The Destructics ambush our hero, but he takes them all on. Above the cliff, Sally strikes a deal with Bean and Bark, saying that she will clear their record and pay more than whatever Mogul is paying them to help out Sonic. They comply, jumping in to help out our guy. Fang, from a distance, snipes Sonic with a stun gun, and the Destructics capture him. With Sonic out of commission, Bean reasons that doing her request wouldn't be in their best interest anymore. Fang tells the Destructics to go ahead and cash in on Sonic while he takes care of Sally. But he finds the idea of just shooting her boring, so he decides to make it more interesting. Since they are near the Freedom Fighters' hideout, he gives her a 10-second head start. Will she make it to the base for help, or will he gun her down first? Sonic wakes up in the van as the Destructics are driving back to the nightclub. He recalls the ambush that just occurred and realizes that Sally is alone with Fang. Fang counts down, and once he reaches 1, he fires at Sally and misses, as he didn't expect for her to take a secret entrance. Once inside the base, she finds Amy, explains the situation, and they formulate a plan. Fang goes inside and takes aim at Sally, but Amy gets the jump on him and wallops him out the base. Sally goes into the lab and instructs Nicole to alert everyone that Sonic has been kidnapped and to arrest Fang. She and Amy take a hovercraft to go after the Destructics. At the club, the old bandits taunt Sonic for a bit before Sleuth tells them to hurry up and fetch Mogul so that they can collect. Sally and Amy finally reach the casino where they encounter Jeffrey, who was hired by Elias to spy on Mogul, and then Rouge, who was doing a joint operation with Jeffrey on behalf of GUN. And it was all the better for it because after Sally fills them in on the situation, Rouge tells them where she thinks Sonic might be at in the casino. There's this panel with Bean that I'm just going to leave on the screen for a bit because it got a chuckle out of me while writing the script. Anywho's, Sally, Amy, and Jeffrey crash in to save Sonic. Care to back me up? And ruin this dress? You're out of your mind. Sonic breaks free and starts wrecking house. Rouge gets a hold of Sleuth, who says he'll go through her if he has to, but Rouge lets him know that Mogul paid her for a job. What's the job? Let's keep reading. The team decides to go confront Mogul. Sally questions Mogul on why he put a bounty on Sonic's head, and Mogul just gaslights her as he asks Sleuth why'd he use the casino as a place to hold up Sonic. Sleuth plays along, making it seem like as if this kidnapping was all his idea. Sonic calls Mogul out on his BS, but without any proof, how can Sonic debunk Sleuth's confession? Mogul asks. Taking the gaslighting a bit further, he begins to talk down to Sonic for his seemingly outlandish accusation to embarrass him in front of the casino guest, telling Sally that he will be sending Elias an invoice to cover the cost of the damages from fighting in the casino? Turns out Rouge's job was to let Sleuth know of Mogul's true plan to humiliate Sonic, and he pays them both for it. As the heroes return home, they pick their chins up and Sonic thanks them all for the great rescue. Bunny calls Sally to let her know that the base is secure, but Fang got away. Other than that, the day is saved. But wait, we cut to Fiona, who is with some strange freedom fighter lookalikes overseeing preparations for a plan orchestrated by none other than Scourge himself. Now that we've covered this chapter of Mogul's Return, allow me to briefly share my thoughts. Firstly, I want to express how engaging I find Mogul. He's probably not the best of the rogues gallery in the story, but he's really my personal favorite villain in the story, no joke. You could say he's basically Eggman with magic instead of technology, and while I find that a fair assessment, I think he has traits that distinguish him from Eggman. They both have their charm, but I feel like Eggman is more prone to let his ego blind his consistency, while Mogul comes off less cocky but is still prideful and rightfully so. While the Doctor is capable of contingency plans, Mogul has more follow-through when it comes to being careful. And let's be real, Eggman has to get away to maintain the status quo, which is fine, but Mogul has managed to be as engaging as Eggman without being entitled to that same level of plot armor. While we're on the topic, I also think it's sick that Ian can juggle all these villains without having them get in each other's way. The world building in these comics is something I've always wanted to see from the Sonic property, and I'm glad these comics and the more recent stuff have writers that can deliver. Bewildered that the dimension-hopping star post activated on their own, Tails and Rotor are attacked by Boomer, and soon the Freedom Fighters base is being infiltrated by the anti-Freedom Fighters, the Suppression Squad. Meanwhile, Sonic and the Chaotix are flanking Eggman City Megalopolis. As Knuckles tries to reason with Leenda and the new Dark Egg Legion, overpowered, the Legion begins to retreat, but Charmy, Saffron, which is Charmy's girlfriend, and Ray are all stuck in the Legion's base after planting an explosive. Rotor makes a call to Sonic about the base being attacked, and he decides to speed back home, confident that the Chaotix can finish the job. Dimitri joins the fight against the Chaotix, equipped with a new mech, and Sonic makes it to the base just in time to see the emergence of his new rival, King Scourge! As Sonic and Scourge start fighting, Scourge recalls their last conversation. It motivated him to return to his dimension, take it over, and use his new team to dominate Sonic's world. The Freedom Fighters aren't going down without a fight. Dimitri begins gaslighting Knuckles about the happenings during the Enerjak arc, and after Julie Sue calls him out on his hypocrisy, begins firing at the Chaotix. Vector encourages Knuckles, who steals his resolve and fights against his people. The fight at the Knothole base ensues, with Scourge threatening his team to get their act together. Rotor makes his escape to call for help. There's a bit where Antoine and Bunny share a moment, with her saying, "So long as your heart's in the right place," and then Miles chimes in with a badass, "We can see to it that it isn't." The Freedom Fighters continue their back and forth with the Suppression Squad. The Chaotix finish their assault, forcing the Dark Egg Legion to retreat. But not before Dimitri leaves Knuckles with a suspicious line about weakening the greatest evil the world has ever known from within. The Freedom Fighters, on the other hand, have found they've met their match. When Sally calls for them to retreat, Sonic reluctantly obliges, meeting up with the Chaotix and stating that he will get the base back. After getting rather comfy at Freedom HQ, Scourge receives a visit from Metal Sonic, who Eggman at first decides to leave alone, but quickly changes his mind. Back in Mogotropolis, the new Acro Kingdom, the Council unauthorizes the plan to retake the Freedom HQ, believing that it'd be better to prioritize the attack on Eggman City. Sonic wants Knuckles to rebel with him and take back the base by themselves, but Knuckles, filled with guilt about his father's death, declines. Sonic runs off to the base to find Metal overwhelming Scourge. Miles patronizes Scourge, deciding it would be insulting to step in and help the man who single-handedly took over Moebius. But that doesn't stop Sonic from stepping in. Sonic proposes a truce with Scourge, and it doesn't go very well. Julie Sue finds Knuckles sulking. He snaps and has a visceral anxiety attack. Julie Sue breaks into an argument with him about not taking it all on his own, but it doesn't go very well. The Hedgehogs continue their fight when Sonic and Scourge begin to have another mid-fight discussion about morality, as Scourge tries to convince Sonic to join him. Archimedes and Charmy manage to cheer Knuckles up, and he reconciles with Julie Sue. Now arriving at the Hedgehog battle is Metal Scourge, who along with Metal Sonic overwhelm the rivals, forcing them to team up. Dimitri calls Eggman out on the fact that he managed to build 2 metal duplicates in hours, but couldn't provide reinforcements for the Dark Egg Legion in the issue prior, stating that he will not allow Eggman to use his people so carelessly. Eggman puts his foot on Dimitri's neck by revealing that he lined explosives on the Dark Egg Legion's new cybernetic body parts, ordering Dimitri to fall in line. During the fight, Scourge allows his ego to distract him, prompting Miles to make an observation of Sonic's character, and how that could be useful to the Suppression Squad. Dimitri informs Leenda about the bombs and might have to consider turning to Knuckles to save his people. Sonic advises Scourge to count on his team, and reluctantly, he calls for help. The Suppression Squad takes out the Metals. After the fight, Sonic decides to retreat for now, and man, this comic is so good at laying out details with body language. For disobeying the Council, Elias must punish Sonic, so he assigns him a task that he might like. With newly built Star Post, Sonic is assigned to invade Moebius, the other dimension. Scourge sneaks into Sonic's house at night and finds Jules. Scourge tries to intimidate Jules, but Jules calls Scourge a coward and stands up for herself and his son, and manages to scare Scourge away. Partnered up with Amy, Sonic travels through the Star Post. After a scuffle with one of the other Eggman's robots, Dr. Kintelberg stops his robot and plans a way to help Sonic undo Scourge's invasion of Moebius. Nicole informs the Freedom Fighters that Miles is outside of the city, and they rush over. Miles wants to propose an alliance with the Freedom Fighters to betray Scourge. Dr. Kintelberg explains what the Suppression Squad has been doing in their world and how they managed to travel to Moebius. Looking to find something that could help them beat Scourge, the Doctor proposes to have them find Rosie the Rascal. Miles fills in the Freedom Fighters on how his team resents Scourge for taking over their world, and offers Sally a plan to join forces to beat him together. Sonic, Amy, and Buns Omega head off into the Moebius castle. Once there, they encounter Rosie herself. She explains how her mind was broken by a special ring before going on the attack. Sonic tries to reason with Rosie to no avail. Miles returns to the base with the Freedom Fighters, and their plan is underway. Amy decides to keep Rosie busy while Sonic finds the Star Post in the Moebius castle. He uses it to get back to the lab where the Suppression Squad and the Freedom Fighters are attacking Scourge and Fiona. Nicole fills Sonic in on the situation, but he's immediately confronted by Fiona. Amy is overwhelmed by Rosie, who broke her hammer, and tries to break the Star Post next, but Buns Omega stops her. Amy calls for Sonic to hurry. He runs over to Scourge, swats him, and they both get hit by Boomer's beam, and Miles throws them both into the Star Post while Boomer shuts it down. Sonic and Amy are stuck in Moebius Castle with Rosie and Scourge. Elsewhere in Moebius, and archer Rob the Hedge finds Silver, who makes his debut in this series and is searching for Sonic. I swear this dude literally comes out of nowhere. The side story at the end is an issue that covers Snivelly's disdain for serving Eggman and him discovering a curious new friend online. Before I continue, just 2 words, just hear me out, 2 words. Peak fiction! Oh my god, it's so damn cool! Ian Flynn uses Charles and Nicole explaining the situation to Sonic's parents as a recap in the beginning. But quickly, we're back to the scramble at the Moebius castle. Amy checks in on Bunzo Omega, who says she has enough power to return to Dr. Kintober. Eggman repels Metal Sonic with an engine that'll allow him to jump between zones, which he immediately does. Rob helps Silver look for Sonic using a warp ring that sends them to Freedom HQ, where Sally gives her frustrations about the Suppression Squad deviating from the plan by trapping Sonic and Amy in Moebius. Silver, familiar with Moebius, is able to use his warp ring to get there as Rob continues to accompany him. The Hedgehog battle wages on in Moebius when suddenly Shadow appears using Chaos Control. The writers are phoning it in at this point, but it's peak, so I'll let it slide for a moment. Oh yeah, and Metal pops up too. And before they can duke it out again, Silver and Rob finally show up at the castle. All the players are here, and the game is set. Silver halts the fighting to find out which one of the hedgehogs are Sonic, who he realizes through Metal Sonic's coloring is blue. Rob stops Silver, who explains that the future was doomed to a traitor in the Freedom Fighters who he suspected was Sonic. Rob tells Silver that Sonic is a hero, and Scourge attacks them both, escalating the fight. To get things under control, Sonic proposes another truce, this time against Scourge, and it actually goes very well. However, Scourge has an ace up his sleeve as he retreats to his throne room to find Anarchy Barrel, the Chaos Emerald derivatives in this world, and uses them to become Super Scourge. At Freedom HQ, Tails finally gets the Star Post back online. Figuring that Sonic has beaten Scourge by now, both teams head over to Moebius to see Super Scourge, the winner of the Hedgehog Havoc. He beats up the Freedom Fighters and makes quick work of his old team. Not even Silver can stop him. Metal attempts to capture Sonic since Scourge is no longer a viable option, but Shadow warps him and Metal Sonic away. Desperate, both teams follow Sally's plan to take Scourge down, which, while executed nicely, doesn't work. Sonic spin dashes Scourge when Scourge takes him outside. Once again, questioning Sonic's morality, Sonic runs away to form a plan, and he comes to the realization that in this world, everything is in reverse. So once Scourge catches up to him, Sonic plays to his ego, implying that Scourge could never beat him in a fair and square fight. Scourge powers down to prove Sonic wrong, but he's weakened by doing so, which Sonic explains that since the after effects of the Chaos Emeralds make him stronger, the Anarchy Barrel would have the opposite effect on Scourge. Down with the king, as Sonic denounces Scourge's way. The next day, Bunzo Omega returns to the Star Post in Moebius to Dr. Kintober. Silver decides to do more research and returns to his future. While all the Freedom Fighters return home, Sonic will head to the Parallel Zone with Scourge in tow. Alrighty, this last issue covers Sonic as he attempts to take Scourge to the multiverse prison. Scourge manages to break free, but the Zone cops find them both before they can even fight. Zector and Zespio take them to the No Zone. Scourge, of course, starts wrecking house, but Sonic and his Zone Cop variant, Sonic, work together to capture him and lock him up for good. Sonic returns home later that day. Sally, on the other hand, is facing charges of treason for acting against the wishes of the council. And let me just say, this is without a doubt my favorite Sally moment in the entire comic series, bar none. Hamlin, a former member of the Freedom Fighters, now council member, throws everything he can at Sally to convince his fellow council members that she deserves punishment for dealing with the Suppression Squad. She argues that her actions were out of necessity, and Hamlin argues that her actions still compromise the council's authority. She makes completely valid points and stands her ground. On the other hand, Hamlin is technically correct that her actions could prove the council redundant. Something about this discussion is so perfect. The citizens of Acorn wanted the council for a reason, so preserving its authority is important to the people. But the people's lives are also important, which is what Sally is ultimately working so hard to protect. Even by keeping the Chaotix in Acorn while the Freedom Fighters were active, it's simultaneously black and white and morally ambiguous, but in a completely real way. It's a perfect end to this arc, but looks like Eggman's latest machine is up and ready. What's he plotting this time? So, what are my thoughts on this arc? Is it worthy of being a contender for a high-tier chapter of the Archie Sonic comics? Yes. Yes, it is. First off, the fact that this comic is consistently connected arcs together by having plot points bleed into the next is brilliant. It makes the world feel much more alive. Knuckles struggling with his guilt from Enerjak and giving into his anxiety with dealing with his people and questioning his worth was in complete contrast with Dimitri and Leonda feeling as if they needed him desperately after learning about the bombs in their bodies. Also, Sonic learning from his mistakes from the Eggman invasion was awesome. When he listened to Sally and retreated from the base, and later when he told Scourge to rely on his team for help, showed how much the invasion changed him. The betrayal of the Suppression Squad was built up pretty well through visual narrative of their body language. Scourge was a textbook schoolyard bully, and there were many times where his shortcomings were on full display. My only gripe is Shadow being shoehorned into the last fight. It was fun, but everyone had a role in the story that led up to that point, but Shadow just came literally out of nowhere. Silver is nearly the same case, but him popping up conveniently at that moment is saved from being contrived only because time travel is such an anomaly. Other than that, man, I found this particular set of issues completely stellar. Alright, next time we'll cover the Iron Dominion arc, so don't miss it. Don't forget to subscribe and participate in the Sonic Frontiers giveaway. Details down below. Once again, take care everyone, spread love, and goodbye.